Thank you for listening to 10,000 Worlds, Part 9. If you've missed the other parts, I encourage you to go back and listen from the beginning. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy these next chapters in 10,000 Worlds.
Chapter 81, Clean. Wet drew another deep breath, filling her lungs and washing away the tangled essence Emily had ensnared her with as she exhaled. She had worked with Mamar for endless hours, long enough that every grin and kindly word grated against her nerves. Still, she wasn't entirely free of the compulsion to protect Aaron. Not that he needed protecting any longer. Like it or not, he was probably the most powerful being in these caverns. Perhaps in the outside universe. He might not know it yet, but eventually he would. This is taking too long, Ruet complained. Lamar sat up and raised an eyebrow. How long is it supposed to take? He asked pleasantly. Ruet sighed. I don't know, not several days. Oh, I will endeavor to work more quickly, Lamar replied, still cheerful, though a trace of sarcasm crept in. Would you like me to have Nina assist? Ruet snorted. No, the word came out too sharp. She isn't ready for this. Mumar grinned. The best lessons are the ones we're ill prepared for, sculptor. But rolled her eyes. She's not ready for this. The things we cannot prepare for teach us the most, Mumar said mildly. I hate you, Ruet replied flatly. Truly, I do. My patient's opinion of me has never mattered very much, he said unbothered. Ruet exhaled sharply. Fine, get the girl. Teach her how. She's less obsessively happy, at least. Lamar rose and wandered off without another word. Threw up her hands. She hated that she could still feel the compulsion in her. She hadn't let Aaron out of her sight in weeks. His presence was beginning to frustrate her. Not because he was unsafe, boring, or anything else really. Mainly because he was dangerous, and he didn't know it. Or, if he knew it, he didn't fully understand it. She had never seen anyone remake themselves entirely, had never even heard of it being possible. Ryland had called Aaron a dragon, not the myth Earth worshipped, but the kind of being so soaked in power it became nearly godlike. A metaphor no one from Earth could ever fully grasp. What paced, her claws clicking faintly against the stone as she walked. She forced herself to slow and concentrated on her breathing. Ryland, she murmured, unsure if it was a curse or a prayer. Far down the hall, Lamar returned with Nina. Other judges worked with other students nearby. Ruet could hear them clearly. Questions spoken aloud, half-formed thoughts, the careless wonder of children. She hated how naive they all were. She knew it wasn't their fault. That didn't stop the anger from rising. Her fists clenched so tightly, her fur prickled. Nina, Lamar, thank you, Ruet said, forcing the words out. Lamar's smile somehow grew even wider, but didn't know how that was possible, and she hated him a little more for it. Lamar began guiding Nina through the sensation she needed to find. Nina caught on almost immediately. Of course she did. What gritted her teeth as Nina described the foreign essence tangled in her. Lamar listened with growing fascination, his eyebrows lifting higher with every observation Nina made. Eventually, Nina asked softly, Can I try? Lamar glanced at Ruet. Ruet nodded once, and Nina reached out with her power. Ruet gasped. She felt Emily's lingering compulsion wrapped gently, precisely in Nina's essence. Then, without any hesitation, it was gone. Not destroyed, absorbed. Ruet stared at Nina in shock. You did it, she said, awe slipping into her voice despite herself. You removed it entirely. Yes, she did, Lamar confirmed, delighted and amazed. This feels strange, Nina said, focusing inward. What I took? Lamar extended his senses through her, studying the effect. Nina, he said slowly, if you'll indulge me, would you give Ruet a simple command? Ruet's eyes went wide. No, don't, Nina spoke anyway, at the same moment. Teach me your magic. The stolen essence surged back into Ruet. She growled, low and furious. Nina hadn't just returned it. She had reused it. Diminished by days of treatment, worn thin by control and resistance, reduced again and again, and Nina had placed it back inside her in an instant, as strong as ever. Undo it now, Wet snapped in a growl. Nina recoiled, shocked by the force of her tone. She raised her hands instinctively and worked to strip the magic away again. Lamar started, unable to smile in the weight of such a show of power. Her impulsion vanished a second time. Silence pressed down on all of them. Ruth breathed hard, staring at Nina. Nina stared back, equally shaken. Amazing, Lamar finally exclaimed, his shock melting back into joy. Ruette didn't join him. She had never felt so exposed, and she had never been so afraid of what Nina might become. Nina shifted and stared at the floor. She didn't understand what she had done. She couldn't fully understand it. She didn't have the required knowledge. Simply incredible, Lamar chittered. She stripped the foreign essence and retained its raw function. I've only seen that 2 or 3 other times by experienced healers focused in this subject. She could cure essence plagues. She could undo curses. She could seize hostile powers as her own. It would be a skill prioritized by anyone in any world. Lamar didn't notice Ruette's terrible gaze on him. She didn't feel the fear and jealousy of the girl who survived. She couldn't understand her depth of fear and envy. So he chattered on. I must take her to Sanctuary. She will earn a name and perhaps become a legend. No, Ruette and Nina said together at once, each staring at the grinning idiot for their own reasons. Why ever not? Lamar asked, stunned. Wait here, Ruette said as she stalked off into the caverns towards the camp. She returned to find Ryland and discuss this, 2 miracles of skill in as many weeks after learning the full weight of his plans was more than she could bear. She knew he would see it as a good omen, but it still didn't sit right with her. As she walked, she felt the short fur on her forearms, neck, and back standing on end. It was uncomfortable, and it echoed her own feelings. Normally, she was in more control of her own physiology. Normally, she was more restrained. She found Ryland talking with a small group, children and judges. She looked over each of the children and wondered which of them would be next to impress her. Ryland, we need to talk, she said plainly. Ryland turned and looked at his friend, immediately seeing something that made him politely excuse himself and walk with her. They were quiet until they were far enough away to be confident they wouldn't be overheard. But still, they spoke in a foreign tongue. What is it, Roulette? Ryland asked quietly. 2 miracles, Rye. 2 of the children of Earth have done the impossible. She shook as she spoke and gestured more wildly than usual. Ryland looked down the long, glowing hallway and smirked. What did Nina do? His voice was curious with an edge of excitement. She took and held Emily's voice and used it herself. Ruette trembled and made no attempt to hide it. Ryland's grin bloomed into a smile. Why would that rush you backwards? How many people do you know that can do that? Ruette dodged. Ryland shrugged. Maybe a dozen? Ruette stared in shock. It's not impossible at all, just impressive. Ryland put a calming hand on her shoulder and pulled them to a stop. Ruette looked into his eyes. She had no training and little experience in the matter. That is not something many accomplish in a lifetime of study. Ryland shook his head. I would guess it's her primary attunement, her true gift. It's likely, if she did it so skillfully on her first try, that healing is only her secondary pursuit. Ruette's shock revealed that this assumption did nothing to ease her nerves. How common is this gift? Ryland shrugged again. Ryland shrugged again, setting his hand on Ruette's shoulder and squeezing gently. Ruette's eyes narrowed. Why do you seem unimpressed? I am impressed. I expect great things and have many theories, but I am still very impressed. He offered her a friendly smile. You said they weren't soldiers. Ruette's voice was firm and not truly a question. Ryland's smile weakened and some small sadness showed. I am not blind to the things they must face if we succeed. He let his hand drop from her shoulder and looked away from her eyes momentarily. Ruette took a deep breath. Ryland waited in the silence. You need to warn them. You need to tell them what we might face, what they might face alone. Ryland met Ruette's eyes as he spoke. Tell me how you would say it, and waited for her to share her plan. Chapter 82, A Little Luck. Jake opened the door to find 3 half-sober burnouts sprawled across the room. One slumped in a chair, one on the couch, and one buried under a blanket on the floor. Two of them glowed with the same radiant aura Jake had seen around Stephanie and Emily. The third carried only a faded, barely there version of it, in grays and blacks. The man on the couch cracked an eye open. He blinked slowly as Jake came into focus. Emily and Stephanie hovered in the doorway behind him. One of them gasped. Jake hadn't mentioned the mess and wasn't sure whether they were reacting to the auras or the filth. Beer cans, old pizza boxes, dirty dishes, every surface was buried under some kind of trash. Oh my God, Stephanie muttered. The man on the couch groaned and pushed himself upright, rubbing his eyes. He grabbed a half-full beer from a nearby chair and drained it in one long pull. Jake stepped into the room, hesitant. Emily and Stephanie exchanged a glance and shook their heads almost imperceptibly. Fucking hell, the man said. I'm still tripping. You're sitting down, Jake asked before he could stop himself. He immediately blushed and glanced back at the door, realizing his mistake. The man's eyes widened. He stared at Jake more closely. Fuck, you're real? He grabbed the empty can and lobbed it at the man in the chair. It bounced off harmlessly. We're real, Jake replied. Behind him, Emily and Stephanie whispered urgently. Jake ignored them. The man in the chair flailed his hand and rolled onto his side, mumbling as he pulled a blanket over his own face. Who are you? The man asked. He squinted. Are you a kid? My name's Jake. He stepped carefully over the debris and offered the man his hand. The man stared at it for a moment and then stood instead of shaking it. My name's Cup. He ignored Jake's hand entirely and peered past him, eyes flicking towards Emily and Stephanie. Who are your friends? He said with a raised eyebrow. Gross, Emily said flatly. Stephanie flushed. That's him and Steph, Jake said quickly. We're magic? Cup snorted. Yeah, kid, I have eyes. Why are you here? The other two men were stirring now, annoyed more than awake. Jake, we should go, Emily said, still standing half outside the door. Jake exhaled. We're looking for more mages. Cup moved easily through the clutter, unbothered by the chaos. He pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and brushed past Emily and Stephanie, flashing Stephanie a crooked grin on his way out. Come outside, we'll talk, he said. Emily stepped back immediately, moving out of his way. Stephanie pressed herself against the doorframe. Jake followed, crunching a beer can underfoot. He paused, picked it up, and set it on the windowsill before stepping outside. Should we be talking out here? Emily asked. Cup shrugged and lit a cigarette, taking several quick drags. Can't people see us? Emily pressed. Jake stepped past them onto the sidewalk. You mean the aura? Cup asked casually. Nah, only people with powers can see it. If you glow bright, you can see it. If you don't, you can't. Cup shrugged. What does it do? Jake asked. Cup coughed. You're seeing it. Just glows. Makes other mages glow too. You believe in mages? Emily asked carefully. Cup met her eyes and held them while he smoked. Then he nodded. Jake leaned forward. You said only people with powers get the bright glow? What can your friend do? He gestured back towards the apartment. Cup grinned slowly. I guess, he said, we'll just have to show you. Chapter 83, Clarity. Aaron's mind was in constant motion, tumbling through a wealth of information that he had absorbed. Some of it was from the past few days. Much of it was from decades of living. Knowledge that had always been locked just out of reach now ground itself smooth like stones in a river, worn down over hundreds or thousands of years. For the first time, everything was beginning to make sense. It clicked together in his head like a puzzle. He sat perched on the flat crystal, legs crossed, hands resting on the insides of his knees. His eyes were closed. His breathing was slow and deliberate. Each inhale drew in fragments of facts and memories. Each exhale aligned them with a growing lattice of understanding already forming in his mind. It occurred to him that he was thinking less like a human and more like a computer. He knew things now, quiet, ugly truths that most people never fully saw. His father had cheated on his mother with a coworker during a business trip. The guilt had never been enough to stop it. His sister had been terrified of magic from the moment it manifested. Unable to control her own, she had convinced herself that no one could control theirs either. So she had smothered it. wherever she found it, believing she was protecting herself and everyone. Aaron understood finally that his friendships hadn't failed because people hated him. They had failed because he had never tried very hard. He had been content to exist on the edges, alone or loosely attached to groups he never fully joined. These were simple things. He also understood his gift. Without the wells or external power source, his raw output was limited. He could generate electricity and manipulate it with near perfect precision. In a world without infrastructure, he would be considered unremarkable. What made him dangerous, what made him different, was the control and the way his world had developed. He could lie to machines. He could deceive computers at a level of processors and relays, adjust logical pathways, alter outcomes before the system realized it had made a decision at all. He had learned to code as a profession, but this wasn't coding. The two helped each other in slight ways, but still there were differences. This was instinctual, like taking someone by the hand and guiding them through a maze neither of you could see. Sometimes you got lost. More of the time, Aaron found his way to the exit. Suddenly, everything felt wrong. Aaron opened his eyes. A tablet, one of many Ryland had brought with him to the camp, was gone. Aaron stood and scanned the space. Everything else was unchanged. The tablet that he had been manipulating from 50 feet away had simply vanished. He walked to where it should have been and frowned. He had never actually seen it, but he was connected to it in the same way as if he was watching a video on a phone in his hand. Full conscious awareness. Aaron, how are you? Ryland's voice came from behind him. Aaron turned. Ryland stood there, holding the tablet and wearing an amused expression. You have enough skill to rival most well-trained Tor now, he said. Aaron narrowed his eyes. He felt capable, exceptional even. It also felt like one of those comfortable lies people tell themselves when everything is going right. Most energy manipulators could never change how computers think, Ryland continued. The timing alone is impossible to manage consciously. Aaron considered that. Much of what he did felt automatic, like flinching away from something that you caught out of the corner of your eye. More reflex than thought. He focused on the tablet again. Ryland turned the screen towards him. The symbols meant nothing. An alien script, but with a swipe of the display, shifted into something mathematical. Not a spoken language, but a logical one. Aaron blinked. Tiny sparks of understanding leapt across his mind. Ryland tilted his head. What are you doing exactly? I'm asking questions, Aaron said quietly. It felt like wandering a vast maze, following faint electrical trails towards destinations he didn't consciously understand. As he explored, knowledge poured into him. Not just about the system, but about other things, hundreds of others, worlds layered on worlds. It felt impossible to explain. How did you block my perception of the tablet? Aaron asked suddenly. Ryland smiled. The Shapers noticed us after your search. I had to move us to another world. Aaron's eyes snapped open. Everything looked the same. No one had reacted. No hesitation, no flicker of awareness. They had crossed worlds without a single soul noticing. Aaron didn't understand how much power that took. How do I understand things that should be impossible to know? He asked. I think part of your ability is copying knowledge structures, Ryland said after a moment. Not thoughts as they occur, but the pathways left behind by understanding. That's how you unraveled Emily's compulsion. And when I opened the way for the judges, you had access to all of us, all of our combined knowledge. He placed a hand on Aaron's shoulder. You truly reforged yourself. Aaron shook his head. That doesn't feel exactly right. Few truths ever do at first, Ryland replied. You stored what mattered in the well, and then you rebuilt around it. So I can read minds? No, Ryland said gently. You read what minds become. Aaron stared at the crystal walls and floor. I thought knowing things would fix things. I thought understanding would make me free. Ryland's voice softened. None of us are ever truly free. He turned and walked away, leaving Aaron to himself. Chapter 84, Advantages. Fenrir nodded once at Selfish, then turned his attention to the other man assigned to him, Emristel, a null essence specialist of high rank, drawn from the Shaper forces stationed in Eastern Europe. For the past several hours, Emristel had been angling, quietly and professionally, to earn Venrian's favor and secure a longer assignment in command once this expedition concluded. Emerstill returned the nod and closed his eyes, drawing his essence inward. The space around him went dull and empty as his null field collapsed tight against his body. Set, Venrian said. Then shift in 5, 4, 3. Selfish tightened her grip around her focus item, a crystal of shifting light, no larger than a phone, and pulled on the power locked inside of it. The transition completed cleanly, and the shaper base around them vanished. They emerged into Well 7. Selfish blinked, then her mouth fell open. Expansive corridors stretched in every direction, lined floor to ceiling with crystalline monoliths the size of small homes. They rose along the walls, arched across the ceiling, vanished into the distance in radiant symmetry. The crystal in her hand hadn't dimmed in the slightest, and here its immense power was meaningless. Miles of stored essence surrounded them, enough to fuel a modern civilization for decades, perhaps more. The sudden pressure of the null field wrapped around her, grounding her back in the moment. Selfish shivered, and reality snapped back into focus. They were 3 sections away from the anomaly. 170 meters of crystal storage had gone dark. She tried not to imagine what kind of force could drink that deeply. Before she could consider more completely, Venrian made a sharp hand gesture, and the 3 moved together. A light jog carried them down an intersecting corridor. Venrian glanced once at the faint timer embedded in his wrist. Syncing their arrival with 7 other teams already in motion, he increased his pace without checking behind him. Selfish and Emerstill kept up. They reached the second intersection and pressed themselves against the towering crystal walls. Venrian leaned out briefly, then ducked back and pulled polarizing lenses over his eyes before peering out again. He turned and made a series of silent gestures. Both Selfish and Emerstill nodded at once. Venrian moved first. He stepped into the corridor, leading towards the dimmed section of the well. Emerstill followed immediately, essence withdrawn and ready. Several seconds later, Selfish sprinted across the exposed span and fell in along the opposite wall of crystals. They moved fast and quiet. Another Shaper team intersected their path. Silently, 7 Shapers moved together down the hall to the location of the anomaly. Finding nothing, Venrian turned to the other commander. Report. No evidence of hostile presence, the lead soldier replied crisply. Capacity is reading 40%. 3 to 4 points lower than our arrival sector. No anomalies detected, no opposition. Venrian grunted. We clocked closer to 50. Fluctuations expected. Emerstill placed a hand against a small crystal, roughly the size of a large chair, and pushed his null essence outward. Normally, his power would shield him like a barrier between the essence and himself. Instead, the crystal drank it in. Emerstill froze. He looked at Venrian. Venrian smirked, but only slightly. Selfish, Venrian said. What can you see? Selfish was already scanning, turning slowly, eyes unfocused as she reached beyond the immediate space. A dimensional Tor arrived beside them, shook his head, and dismissed the concern with practiced confidence. Nothing remains, the Tor said. These crystals strip lingering essence in seconds, less sometimes. There's nothing to follow here. Selfish? Venrian repeated, sharper this time. Weak dimensional residue, she said, brow furrowed as she pivoted. Not even close to what you described, but it's there. She closed her eyes. There's a lot of dimensional essence just beyond this world. Thin, diffuse, not even as much as what I'm holding, but it's widespread. The Tor scoffed. There is nothing here or beyond. Quiet, Venrian snapped. He turned back to Selfish. Go on. It's faint, Selfish said slowly. Barely a scar. Not the signature you warned me about, but consistent, like something moved through without anchoring. Venrian smiled. A late arriving commander leaned in close and whispered, The World Breaker? Venrian didn't answer. He turned his glare on the man, who immediately backed away. Further down the corridor, another Tor approached. Venrian moved to meet him and offered a quick, polite salute. Anything? The Tor inhaled deeply, as if smelling the air. Dozens of wielders, shaper tech, shaper markings. Are you certain this isn't an internal operation, sir? One the High Council doesn't know about? Fenrir murmured. The torch shrugged and drifted off, still testing the space around him. Teams continued to arrive. Fenrir assigned tasks with sharp efficiency. Air sampling, ground analysis, laser mapping of nearby crystals. No details were ignored or overlooked. He liked the reports less with every update he got. Evidence of shaper equipment, confirmed tech residue. Between 15 and 30 individuals, it looked more and more like a sanctioned team conducting experiments, an internal one, and Ryan hated where that conclusion led. Even worse, he hated how it would read to the council. A rogue team discovering a well and running tests without clearance wasn't just likely, it was the only explanation left. He exhaled slowly, allowing frustration to flood through him. Fenrir, Selfish called out. He turned. I think, she said carefully, eyes bright with focus, I think I can follow them. Fenrir's smile was immediate and unrestrained, as he didn't have to return to the council. Nothing.
Chapter 85, Supergroup. Jake was smiling broadly despite the headache pressing behind his eyes. He had only glanced at Kent, just a quick check, and found him sitting in some downtown office working at a computer. That was all. The pain bloomed immediately, sharp and instant. Jake pulled away before it could get any worse. That was fine. They were with real mages now. Cup's friend Greg dragged his feet as they piled into cars and headed out towards the edge of the city. The quarry they ended up in was little more than a wide scar in the land. Loose towers of rock piled high on three sides like a crude arena. Greg stood at the center of it all, hurling glowing embers at glass bottles, metal plates, and whatever else they could find and toss into the air. Each target shattered, melted, or exploded in a shower of sparks. Emily and Stephanie watched stunned. The sour doubt of the morning evaporated in the face of reckless, undeniable power. This was magic. This was what wizards were supposed to look like. Greg flung an empty water bottle high into the air and snapped a burst of heat into the base, sending it arcing up and over the rocks with a triumphant yell. "This is awesome!" Jake shouted, his voice lost in the chorus of whoops and laughter. "This ain't nothing," Greg said casually, scooping up a wrapped slab of metal that might have once been a part of a car. Jake barely noticed anything else. Greg poured power into the metal. It glowed white hot, edges dripping and smoking as it softened. He crushed it effortlessly in his hand, then hurtled the molten ball down the rock corridor, yet heated further mid-flight before bursting apart like a firework. Everyone jumped and cheered again. High above them, hidden along the ridge of rock, a scout watched in silence. He spoke softly into his radio, confident his voice wouldn't carry. "At least two, Commander, not shapers," he reported. "If the aura specialist is accurate, all five are attuned and aware. No formal discipline detected. Should I approach?" "You're certain they aren't shapers?" Mora asked, watching the live feed from several hundred miles away. "Their signatures are similar," the scout admitted, eyes never leaving the group. "But look at them. No control, no structure, no academy training of any kind." Below, Jake looked up. He narrowed his eyes at the ridge, and the scout froze. "What do you advise?" Mora asked calmly. "Shut up," Jake yelled, taking a few cautious steps towards the empty hilltop. The others followed his gaze, confusion rippling through them. Mora leaned closer to the feed. Lokar was one of the best. He was invisible. Not truly. His gift made him unnoticeable. Minds slid past him, ignored him, forgot him, even while you were speaking to him or in the same room. Laura herself had lost track of him mid-conversation more than once. And yet, the youngest boy was staring directly at him. Lakar felt a chill down his spine. Perhaps he had underestimated them. "What is it, Jake?" Emily asked, scanning the ridge. "There's someone watching us," Jake said simply. "I don't see anyone," Emily replied. "I know," Jake said, "but they're there." Emily straightened and raised her voice. "Come out of hiding!" Lockhart dimmed his field on instinct, and then he was there, revealed to all of them. A soldier dressed head to toe in black stood atop the rocks. Neatly trimmed beard, compact backpack, a weapon holstered at his thigh. Disregard her command and retreat, Lucar, Laura ordered sharply, eyes locked on the screen before her. Lucar couldn't. Sweat emerged along his head and neck. Tell us who you are and what you're doing here, Emily commanded. Tor Lokar Folk, he answered unwillingly. Shaper incursion scout. Lokar, retreat, now, Mora commanded once again. On reconnaissance for Shaper command, Lokar continued in a flat voice. Observing potential Shaper activity for report. Stand there and ignore us, Emily said, then turned back to her group. What should we do? She whispered. Jake shrugged. Stephanie looked between them. Greg stayed silent. Cup snorted. Tell him to fuck off and forget about us. I'm not working with a Fed. Emily hesitated and then nodded. She turned to the man once more. Forget you found us, she said firmly. Forget everything about us, return to your people, and report nothing. Lokar stepped back and faded away impossibly once more. Jake followed him with his powers. It hurt badly, but he held on. Tracking the man felt impossible. Tracking the pod that he climbed into after several minutes was much easier. Mora watched the feed with a faint smile. Impressive, she murmured to herself, disabling her comms with Lokar. Jake watched the pod skim across the landscape, lifting cleanly into the air and racing back towards the alien presence. Let's get out of here, Cup said. Stephanie grabbed Jake's arm, pulling him towards the truck. Emily was talking, asking questions, but Jake barely heard as he was concentrating. 15 minutes later, the pod touched down among hundreds of identical craft. Lakar marched into a meeting chamber where 4 others waited, including the woman from Jake's dream. Jake flinched at seeing her again. Lakar snapped to attention. No anomalous activity detected, no Shaper signatures. Then why did you abort early? Mora asked. No findings, Lakar said quickly. No reason to linger. Report to medical, Mora ordered. Full written report, due immediately. Jake's head throbbed violently, and for just a moment he thought she looked straight at him. Her eyes slid past, and he pulled away instantly. I think we're good, he said weakly from the back seat. What did you see? Emily asked. Can we get pizza first? Jake begged. I'm starving. Stephanie and Emily exchanged a look. Then Emily sighed. Fine, she said. Pizza. Chapter 86. Jealousy. Liz was moping. She had been so motivated, so alive with potential. A week of training had drained every ounce of it from her. This glowing place was wearing on her too. It wasn't dark, but she hadn't seen anything like the sun in days, and its absence gnawed at her in quiet, constant ways. She sighed deeply as she walked the endless identical corridors. Orla's advice to not take turns had been excellent. Every inch of this place looked exactly like the last. Liz was tired of it, drained of hope and ambition by this temporary prison and the endless cycle of lessons layered on top of exhaustion. She kicked at the ground for lack of anything else to kick at. Her foot caught hard. She frowned, wondering again what the floor was made of. Curious, she phased her shoe and foot through it without effort. Watching her own leg vanish into the surface was surreal every single time. She pulled her foot free and kept walking. After an unknown span of time, she sighed again and turned around. The thought of returning to lessons and the overly eager crowd of students was too much. She wandered the hallways in search of something, anything to distract her. She found nothing. Once, she had hated thinking of magic at all. Once, she had been in love, and had been loved in turn. She had a partner to face the world with. Maybe not this world, but her world. She would give anything to go back to that. That life had been simpler, quieter, less intense, less cruel. Now, she finally had time, freedom, and space. She had no idea what to do with any of it. The tears came before she realized she was crying. She sank to the floor and let them fall, quiet at first, then harder, sobs shaking her chest as memories pulled her backwards through a life she would never get back. She didn't know how long she cried. Eventually, she wiped her face and looked up. The caverns were gone. She was in her room, exactly as she had left it. Her bed, her desk, her window, her shelves. She blinked, waiting for the illusion to fade. It didn't. She sniffled, a broken sound of disbelief, and laughed once before crying again as she stood and slowly turned in place. Her phone vibrated. Aaron had kept it charged for her. He had kept everything charged as part of his training. She pulled it from her pocket and unlocked the screen. Notifications flooded in. A group chat she didn't remember joining was exploding. Aaron created a group chat. Vince, what is happening? Nina, people came, they approached the camp, and now we're back. Caleb, who? Kelly, what the fuck? Sarah, what's happened? Then finally, Aaron, the Shapers came. Ryland had to send us away. Training is over. Come to 4450 Hillside Drive, my sister's house. I'll wait for you there. Liz's breath caught. More messages poured in. Nina, Liz, are you here? Where are you? Beth, that's going to be a problem. We're not in Rancho. Vince, Beth, Kelly, George, and I are about half a day out. Pick them up and we'll get there late tonight. Nina, Liz, Aaron, that's fine. Do you need anything to get to Rancho? Vince, we'll figure it out. A new name appeared. Emily. Aaron, what's happening? I'm not at home. We're at 1525 Rain Cloud. Aaron, go to the address Emily provided. Liz stared at the screen, blinking hard. Training was over. They were scattered. They were home. She didn't question how Emily's number had ended up in her phone. She shoved her phone into her pocket, moved quickly, throwing clothes into a bag, hands shaking with urgency. She reached the door and stopped. Her car wasn't here. She turned, grabbed the truck keys from the counter, and forced herself to breathe, to push Hank from her mind. Outside, she tossed the bag into the passenger seat and started the engine. 30 notifications buzzed as she moved. She dismissed them, punched the rain cloud address into her phone. It was 20 minutes away. She hesitated, then added a stop for a burger. She was starving, and she hadn't had real food in too long. Another vibration. She checked. Nina. Liz, oh my God, please tell me you're okay. Liz smiled faintly and typed with trembling thumbs. I'm okay. Come meet everyone at the house. Nina. I don't have a ride. Liz, where are you? Nina. Home? Liz, on my way. She set the phone down and drove. Chapter 87. Crowded. Jake, snap out of it. Emily was leaning back over the seat on one knee, nearly throttling him in the back of the truck. They had already parked outside the pizza place. Cup was knocking on the window, making faces, trying to get their attention while Emily shook Jake hard by the shoulders. Jake was there, just not there, watching them and a dozen other things at once. The world felt crowded, alive in a way it had never felt before. Every new place he touched with his power peeled back another layer of reality and showed him secrets he didn't know how to ignore. Jake, Aaron is back, Emily said urgently. Can you find Aaron? Jake shook his head. You know I can't see Aaron, Jake muttered. Just try. She released him and sat back, breathing hard. Cup stuck his face against the glass and crossed his eyes. Jake glanced at him and rolled his own before closing them and shifting his focus. He reached out, searching for the man he had never been able to find before, and this time he felt him. Pulled across the city as if by a thread, Aaron stood on a balcony, staring over the lights. He looked distant, far away in a way Jake recognized immediately. Then Aaron smiled. Jacob, right? He said softly. Jake flinched. Aaron wasn't looking at him, but Jake could feel him, aware, calm, and curious. I know where you are, Jacob, Aaron continued. I'll meet you there. Jake gasped and snapped back to himself. Emily was staring at him with wide, hopeful eyes. He said he'd meet us here, Jake breathed. Before he could ask anything else, Jake was already opening the door. Cup stepped inside, eyebrows raised. Greg waited a few steps away on the sidewalk. Stephanie climbed out after Jake, offering Cup a quick smile before dropping her gaze to the ground. Emily was nearly skipping towards the door, barely able to contain herself. Inside, the smell of grease and heat washed over them. Then Jake saw him. Aaron was walking towards them from the back of the dining room. Jake stopped dead. Emily nearly ran into him before looking up. And then she screamed. She launched herself forward, running straight for her brother. Who is that? Cup asked. That's Aaron, Jake said automatically. Then something snapped. Terror surged through him so fast it stole his breath. "Emily, wait!" Jake yelled across the room. She turned, confused. Aaron kept walking. His eyes were shining with tears. Jake didn't understand how he was here. A moment ago, he had been miles away, standing in his apartment. Now he could see him with his eyes and his mind, and he had traveled miles in less than a blink of an eye. And suddenly, horribly, he knew. He grabbed Emily and yanked her back against him, wrapping his arms around her protectively. "Stop," he whispered. "That can't be him." Aaron halted. "It's me, Jake," he said gently, lifting his hands. "It's really me." "How?" Jake choked. "Rylan trained us. Where do you think we've been for a month?" Emily recoiled a step. Jake followed. "It's barely been a week," she said. "Gent would know that," Jake muttered. His confusion was clear in his tone. Silence fell. Emily looked between them, panic bleeding into confusion. "It's me, Em," Aaron said desperately. "I'm back." He took a step forward. Emily took a step back. "Stop!" The word cracked like a whip. Emily spoke it loud enough to be heard clearly by everyone in the restaurant. Everything froze. Patrons, servers, the cashier mid-blink. The room went still. Even Jake couldn't move. Aaron blinked, then smiled sadly. "I purged your commands, made myself immune. I'm not Ghent. I'm your brother, and I remember everything." Emily broke. Tears spilled down her face as she clutched Jake, shaking. "I'm still your brother," Aaron whispered. "I still love you." "Emily," he said carefully, "you need to let them go." He gestured around him, at the frozen bodies, mid-step, mid-pour. Emily gasped and released Jake, looking around in horror. "Disregard that command," she said shakily. Nothing happened. She raised her voice. "Disregard that command." The room lurched back into motion. Someone rushed in, breathing, plates, voices. Cup exhaled sharply. "Don't ever do that again," he said quietly. He stepped forward and offered Aaron his hand. Aaron took it. "Name's Cup," he said. "Like the thing you drink out of, not the thing you wear over your junk." "Aaron," he replied, smiling. Cup glanced around. "Let's sit before someone calls the cops." They crowded into the biggest table. Cup spun a chair backward and dropped into it as everyone else slid into the wide corner booth. "What happened?" Emily asked urgently. "You're being super weird, Em," Aaron offered. Cup cleared his throat loudly. "This is Greg. He throws fire." Greg nodded. Aaron blinked and then laughed softly. "Busy week, huh?" He turned to Stephanie and offered his hand. "Aaron, I think you're my landlord," she muttered back. "Oh," he blinked. "That is weird." Then he frowned. "Why are we all glowing?" Cup grinned. "It's an aura." "Can you turn it off?" Aaron glanced around the room, expecting to be noticed, expecting all the eyes of the restaurant to be on them. "Nope," Cup answered simply. Aaron tilted his head, and then the glow around him collapsed inward, vanishing. Everyone stared. "How did you do that?" Cup asked, shocked. "I'm just channeling the essence through myself," Aaron shrugged, "so it doesn't react to your power." "Mana?" Cup corrected. "Yeah, mana," Aaron nodded. Jake didn't wait. He followed the feeling, matched his heartbeat. The glow around him dimmed in pulses. Everyone stared as they noticed. "It's flickering," Emily said. "It hurts my eyes," Cup muttered. "There are no shadows," Stephanie realized. Cup shrugged. "It's not light. It's not giving off any light, anyway." Then Cup slapped the table. "Now," he said flatly, "who was that Fed that was watching us? We have a lot more to discuss here." Jake groaned. "Oh, now you want to talk about the aliens." "Aliens?" Three voices said at once. Jake closed his eyes and shook his head. "Aliens." Chapter 88. Answers. 30 Shaper tours surrounded the remaining four figures in the well. Venrian stalked through the circle of men and women and stopped in front of a woman dressed like a common witch. Her outfit was almost comical. He sneered openly at the robes, at the shadows dancing across the embroidered stars that glimmered and faded with quiet power. It wasn't the clothing that unsettled him. It was the way she stood, proud, still, and unafraid. 30 Tor, some of the finest shapers ever trained, and she didn't flinch. "Who are you?" Venrian demanded. "Orla of Sanctuary." His reaction betrayed him. just for a fraction of a second, but his eyes widened, breath caught, and he knew she had seen it. He forced his jaw tight. What business does Sanctuary have here? He growled. Orla's grin widened. The morality of the Shapers is of utmost concern to Sanctuary. Your organization has embedded itself deeply within our society. We seek to know what and who you are. Fenrir chose silence. Sanctuary is not one of these primitive worlds you harvest, Orla said coldly. We are not cattle, Shaper. Fenrir swallowed. The council is aware of your crimes, Orla continued calmly. We remained here only to inform you. Fenrir saw an opportunity. What does Sanctuary want in exchange for maintaining our current arrangement? Fenrir asked smoothly. An old judge with a thick white beard surged forward, fury on his face, but Orla lifted a hand, and he stopped immediately. There will be no negotiation, she said pleasantly. We are not here to bargain. We are here to judge. Fenrir measured the room. 4 judges, 30 Tor. Even judges would fall to a number like this. You are guilty of world-ending genocides, Orla said quietly. You command the organization known as the Shapers. You will answer for your crimes, here and now. Her eyes burned. Each of you will be banished and sealed upon the survivors' world. We will root out all the others who knew of these acts and seal them as well. Benrian scoffed. Survivors' world? What nonsense is that? One of the many worlds you purged, Orla said softly, where you left one living witness to prove your guilt. There are never survivors, Venrian laughed. There are, Orla said, and stepped forward, her finger pressed toward his chest. Venrian twisted away, rolling across the floor as a shadow tore itself from Orla's shoulder and lunged where his face had been. Retreat, he screamed. The Shapers shifted at once. 8 vanished instantly, struck mid-motion by darts hurled from judges, either thrown or through firearms. The 8 could have simply ceased to exist or were banished, as Orla had claimed. Venrian would have joined them, but Emerstill crashed onto him, taking the dart full in the back. The null essence absorbed the impact. Useless metal clattered harmlessly to the floor. They scrambled up as 3 more Tor disappeared. Selbish's hand slammed onto Venrian's shoulder. The world folded, the heart of Shaper headquarters and sanctuary. Venrian didn't pause. He inhaled once and marched. The ornate halls echoed beneath their boots as they advanced toward the council chambers. The judges had found the wells. At least 3. The 3 that Selpish had chased them through. Perhaps they knew everything. Perhaps they didn't need to. What they knew was too much already. Venrian burst through the doors without slowing. 6 figures sat elevated in a circular chamber, presiding over some irrelevant petition. High Council, Venrian barked. Clear the room immediately. Venrian, this is highly irregular, one voice began. Sanctuary judges are purging the Shapers, he said flatly. My news cannot wait. The petitioners were ushered away with a gesture, and after a slow minute, silence fell. Only the 6 counselors, Venrian, Selpish, and Emmer still remained. They have found the wells, Venrian continued. They have declared all responsible will be sealed upon Noctium-scarred worlds. My entire unit could be destroyed. Shock rippled through them. Impossible. They have no authority. You are mistaken. How? 4 of them exclaimed at once. They began executing immediately, Venrian said. You must evacuate Sanctuary now. They mean to declare war on us? One asked, clearly in denial. It will not be war, Venrian snapped. The Circle of Judges holds greater authority here than we ever could. They threaten us? Another growled. Venrian turned away. I have delivered you your warning. Either flee with every soul who knows the secret of the wells, or remain and be judged by Sanctuary's most powerful order. He left without waiting for permission. Selpish and Emmer still followed. Behind them, the council shouted. Venrian ignored them. He was already planning how to make his escape. But first, he had to return to Mora. Chapter 89, Survivor. Is that really all we can do? Huet asked quietly. Rylan did not look up from his work. He continued packing instruments and crystal housings into padded slots, sealing each compartment with careful precision. What else would you have us do? He asked. Everything they owned now fit inside a single transport container. Workshop, supplies, and living space all compressed into one mobile refuge. It would be their home again when they returned to Earth, whether that was in a few hours or a few days. Click Click carried the towering crates without complaint, setting them into neat rows along the curved walls of the container. The rhythmic click of his shelled feet echoed softly across the floor, close enough to the cadence of his speech that Duet kept glancing up, half expecting him to be talking to her. I don't know, she admitted. Plead with the judges, perhaps? Ask them to act, to fight? Her shoulders sagged as the words left her. You gave your account, Ryland said. I presented the evidence. The judges must decide what is best for Sanctuary and themselves. Our task remains unchanged. What continued loading equipment, hands moving more out of habit than purpose. It feels like failure, she said. They've already taken so many worlds. Perhaps we stop them from taking one more? And even here, they had enough influence to stand against the judges, if only barely. Their power will be diminished, but he hesitated. I cannot escape the feeling that we've already lost again. Ryland set aside the crate he was sealing and stepped towards her. He placed his hands gently on her shoulders, waited until she stilled, then pulled her into an embrace. They stood that way in silence for nearly a minute before he spoke. I will not pretend this is a victory, he said quietly, but it will wound them deeply. Even if we fail on Earth, this will trouble them for years, and that matters. But will they even care? Wet asked, gripping him tightly. Losing Sanctuary, will that truly mean anything to them? Ryland considered before answering. I do not believe the judges will carry this fight to Earth, or to any Shaper stronghold. But the Shapers are finished here. They will no longer walk openly through Sanctuary's halls. They will hide, and they will lose influence, and they will lose access. What was once a river will become a trickle. Wet pulled back slightly, searching his face. They are done here, Ryland said, a faint curve touching his lips. They will continue as a group, but not as an avalanche. Only as debris still sliding downhill. This is a victory, even if it feels like retreat. She nodded slowly and returned to her work, the heaviness in her chest easing into something fragile and uncertain, but hopeful. What about Orla? She asked suddenly. Ryland blinked. What about Orla? Click Click paused and released a deliberate hum, followed by several sharp snaps. Understanding dawned. Her duty is to Sanctuary, Ryland said quietly. She will remain here, a judge, as she always has been. She won't come with us? Wet asked hesitantly. No, he said gently. I do not think she can, or will. It is unlikely we will meet her again. Wet sealed the final crate without hiding her disappointment. Even Click Click seemed to sense the loss. He lifted the box effortlessly, carrying it back into the container with a sudden rhythm to its steps. He climbed into the container and lifted the last box effortlessly, a subdued rhythm to his steps. They finished their work in silence. When the workshop stood empty, they paused to take it in. The place that had been their shelter, their refuge, their fragile foothold in Sanctuary. Ruth's eyes were damp, her breathing was heavy, not from labor, but from grief. Click Click broke the quiet with a low, sorrowful hum. Are you certain you wish them with us? Rylan asked him. Click Click turned sharply and answered with urgent, insistent notes. Rylan nodded once. Then, he said softly, let us return to Earth. Part 2. We will not be abandoning our mission here. Moore's voice was steady, but there was an edge beneath it now. Something brittle and dangerous. She pulled Venry into one of the small conference rooms off the bridge and darkened the glass walls with a gesture, sealing them away from most of the crew's eyes. She knew a few specialists might still hear fragments of what was said. She no longer cared. What mattered was that this was not the open bridge where Venrian had burst in and announced disaster to half of her command. I do not think you understand, Venrian said. The judges of Sanctuary know of the wells, of the Noctium, of everything. They will banish us, all of us. For a moment, Laura thought of striking him, not from anger alone, but from disappointment. She mastered herself with the same discipline that had built the Shapers from ash and blood. If she had intended to flee, she would have done so a century ago when Ryland first uncovered the truth. Not now, not when they stood on the edge of another harvest. Control yourself, Fenrian, she said sharply. We are shapers. She paced once, then stopped before him. If what you say is true, then the world breaker will be here on Earth, and he will oppose us. She could not bring herself to say Ryland's name. Ryland is dead, Fenrian said, though the words carried no conviction. Mora gave a short, humorless laugh. You do not believe that. She shook her head slowly. He left us nearly a century ago, and has worked against us ever since. The Noctium is unforgivable to him. He is not dead. He is hiding. Fenrian stared at her, unsettled by the certainty in her voice. You believe the judges simply found the wells, stumbled upon them? Mora continued. You think it was chance? She exhaled sharply. Ryland led us here. Every step, he intends to end the Noctium, and if necessary, the Shapers themselves. Her gaze hardened. That is why we must destroy him. End the last illusion that we can be challenged. But Fenrian began, then faltered. But what? Mora snapped. He is one man, even with allies, even with the children, even with judges. We are the Shapers. We span 1,000 worlds. We number in the billions. There is no force in the universe capable of standing against us. Fenrian nodded slowly. I will request reinforcements, additional incursion ships. We will harvest this world and move on, as we always have. The words were correct. His posture was not. Mora studied him a moment, then shook her head. Stand straight. Conduct yourself like a commander. Her voice softened only slightly. Sanctuary is a setback, a costly one. I regret the loss of your team, but I need you focused. If you lose control now, you lose us what we have left. She turned and left him alone in the darkened room. When the door opened onto the bridge, she found half the crew pretending not to listen. Back to work, she barked loudly. Silence fell instantly. Selfish, Emrystil, with me. Emrystil rose, saluted without hesitation, and followed. Selfish lingered, then raised a hand timidly. What about Venerian? She asked. He has other duties to attend to, Mora said, already moving past her. We still have a mission, and we will not fail. Selfish glanced at Emrystil, searching for doubt. She found none. The man matched Mora's stride with mechanical precision, and they left the bridge. Selfish followed, several steps behind, unease tightening in her chest as she wondered, for the first time, who she was becoming, and whether there would ever be a way back. Chapter 90. The Shapers. The rest of the sanctuary trainees arrived in waves, and soon the small house was overflowing. Cots lined the walls, air mattresses crowded the living room floor. Someone had swung a hammock through the doorway of the den and claimed it triumphantly before anyone could object. Stories spilled through every room. Tales of training and terror, of failure and small victories, of teachers both kind and cruel. The awkward stiffness of reunion softened into laughter, then into something warmer. Friendship, newly reforged, settled over the house like a blanket against the cold. Jake had consumed enough soda to vibrate in place. He paced endlessly, talked too fast, laughed too loud, and interrupted himself mid-sentence as new ideas crashed into his head. A few of the others drank with the stories, though never to excess. The mood hovered in a rare, fragile place, somewhere between relief and celebration. Music hummed softly through the house, just loud enough to fill the gaps in conversation. Stephanie moved through the rooms in quiet awe. Only days ago, she had doubted herself, doubted everything. Now certainty had taken root in her like a foundation stone. No more wondering if she was imagining things. No more fear of madness. She watched others demonstrate their powers with open fascination, not envy. Their gifts were flashy, dangerous, beautiful, and none of it mattered as much as the simple confirmation that she had not been wrong about herself, about what she was. Emily and Aaron had vanished together for nearly an hour. They left in strained silence and returned laughing. Now they stood shoulder to shoulder, trading stories with anyone who would listen. The comfort of reunion slowly washing away weeks of fear and distance. Nina lingered at the edges of the rooms. She watched more than she spoke, smiled more than she shared. From time to time, her gaze flicked toward Emily, and for a fleeting moment, She imagined asking her to command someone to do anything, just so she could feel the power again. Each time the thought died before reaching her lips. Still, she found herself smiling at the strange beauty of the gathering. Cup had taken control of the music. He managed the volume with surgical precision, nudging it higher when laughter peaked, lowering it again when conversations deepened. He treated the atmosphere like a living thing, guiding its rhythms with instinctive ease. From time to time, he pushed it just far enough that dancing broke out in scattered clusters, then gently drew it back before chaos could follow. Greg stayed close to him, quiet and observant. Eventually, he drifted towards the walls and found himself beside Nina. They shared a few words, settled into companionable silence, listening more than speaking. Without judges or teachers, the room breathed differently. No lessons, no commands, no expectations, just peers, friends, family, in a way blood sometimes failed to be. Smiles came easily. The weight of training loosened its grip. As twilight bled into the night, Cup raised the music again, and then the front door slammed open. Two women stepped inside. Both wore scrubs and simple shoes, as if they had wandered in from a hospital shift. One was blonde, the other raven-haired. Their entrance cut through the room like a blade. The blonde smiled broadly. "I'm glad you're all having so much fun," Morris said. Cup killed the music instantly. Silence swallowed the house. "It's you," Jake whispered. Maura inclined her head towards him, still smiling. "So you're not one of mine." "I thought so." Aaron and Emily stepped forward together. "Who are you?" Aaron asked. Maura studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded once. "Maura LaSalle, of the Shapers, command of the incursion forces of Earth." Her eyes swept over the room. She expected panic. She found nothing, not even recognition. To her surprise, nearly half the faces remained calm. The rest looked only mildly unsettled. "You were expecting me?" she asked, amused. "She's the leader of the aliens," Jake said helpfully. A few nervous laughs followed. Maura blinked. "Aliens?" "Well," Jake shrugged, "you're definitely not from Earth." She laughed softly. "No, we're not from Earth." Then her expression sharpened. "What does the name Ryland mean to you?" Shock rippled through the room. Aaron stepped forward. "He trained us in Sanctuary. He taught us to control our gifts." Maura's smile vanished instantly. Her gaze fixed on Aaron with sudden intensity. "What does it matter?" Aaron asked. Maura's lips curved again, this time without warmth. "Can you tell me if he's on Earth yet? We have business in Sanctuary." "What business?" Aaron hesitated. "He said only that we would one day lead the people of Earth." Maura's expression darkened. "The Shapers will reveal themselves in 18 days," she said calmly. "None of you are to seek us out. None of you are to interfere. None of you are to contact our agents." Her voice hardened. "Tell me you understand, or I will collect you now, imprison you, until our work here is finished." Fear gripped the room. "Tell me you understand," she snapped. Aaron nodded. "We understand." Around him, the others nodded as well, taking his cue. Satisfied, Maura turned and left. The second woman followed without a word. Several breaths passed before anyone moved. "Jake?" Aaron said quietly. "Yeah? Can you watch her?" Jake squeezed his eyes shut and swallowed hard. "No, I can't." Aaron turned sharply. "Can anyone use their powers?" One by one they tried. One by one they failed. Panic surged. Voices overlapped. Questions shattered the air. "Cup's power still works," Jake shouted, realizing that none of their auras had dimmed. Silence fell again. "How did you know?" Emily asked her brother. "I tried to blast her," Aaron admitted. Fear spread like fire, and the night that had begun in laughter ended in cold terror. Thank you for listening to 10,000 Worlds, written and read by Weston Gill. That's me. All parts are posted at first on my YouTube and then uploaded for my podcasts, which you're listening to now. If you'd like to get a head start, follow along on my YouTube page at Venture Saga. I hope you enjoyed listening. Thank you.